Hi everyone, it's Joey Remenyi from seekingbalance.com.au. Today I have a case study for us, which is always a treat. I want to introduce you to Bethany, who's calling in from the US. So first of all, welcome Bethany. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bethany has a beautiful story, as we all do. And Bethany brings us the story of multiple diagnoses, confused diagnoses, and it's a very common journey that I hear in my Rocksteady members in over my professional career, of different doctors giving different diagnoses, and then that can lead to also different physiotherapists, different psychologists, different treatment options, and it's all confusing. There's a lot of clutter, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation. Where do we go? Who do we turn to? So Bethany's story includes Lyme disease, triple PD, vestibular migraine, débarquement disorder or syndrome, and recurrent BPPV. So there's a lot of different fancy medical labels. And what we really want to turn the spotlight on toward today is Bethany as a whole person and what her journey of self-knowing, self-discovery, and the gentle step-by-step process of coming home to oneself, where we can hold all of those labels lightly and be present to the fullness of our experience. So Bethany, I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. And thank you for being a part of my Rocksteady community.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Do you want to start a little bit with maybe just how you found Rocksteady and where you were at that point in your life? It's usually a bit of a low point when we start this journey for most people.
Yes. I would say I think it was about 2021. And it was really just out of desperate internet searches. And just trying to find something. And I came across your stuff. I had seen some of your stuff on YouTube, and I had watched it prior, and then found out about the Rocksteady program, and I had your book, and I was like, I just need to try it and see what happens. And so yeah, I got it back then. That was, I'm not sure if, I guess that was probably my lowest point in the last like 6 years or so. That's kind of the time frame that I've been dealing with it. But you made me look at this in a different way after being so heavily immersed in like the broken medical system.
Yeah. So
But it's taken a while
we live
for
in
it
a,
to all
yeah,
sink in.
we live in a world that pathologizes sensations,
Mhm.
rather than welcoming the full variety of sensory experience into our humanity, even the intense stuff, even the hard stuff. We live in a world that tells us, no, you should feel this way, you should be this way, you should. And so there's this push-pull of trying to be something rather than meet ourselves where we are and go, okay, what's my body communicating? What if
Mhm.
these sensations are truly my own inner wisdom telling me that there is something not quite right in the world around me, and the person environment fit mismatch, the fit
Yeah.
may need some work. So it is a really big paradigm shift to move from abnormalizing, feeling broken, wanting a fix, chasing answers and certainty, to shifting into, okay, here I am, my body is giving me all of these neural signals. There's potentially a lot of wisdom in my body that's surfacing to my conscious awareness. Can I pause and decode it? Can I pause and figure out what is my body saying? What are my next steps?
Yeah, I think something that I like really want to highlight, because I got really sucked into um so I think as a whole, looking at it now from a bit older perspective, and just reflecting on the years, um I had a lifelong history of trauma, I guess, more so emotional. I was when I was young, I was in the middle of a really nasty divorce, and that caused me a lot of fear and anxiety that started to develop at like a young age. And it over the years, it always changed and took on new faces.
Hmm.
And even as a kid, I was like searching for answers. There must be a reason why. And like I'd get stomach aches all the time. I would have a lump in my throat. I thought there was something wrong. I was scared I was going to throw up all the time. I became hyper focused of this fear of throwing up. I was very scared of germs. Um, I was a very fear-based child. But even as a kid, I mean, they would put me through tests to try to figure out why my stomach hurt all the time, and like nothing ever came of it. Um, but then I would do these tests and I'd become more scared and anxious, and like, and it was just this like vicious cycle that started really when I was young. Um, and then as I kind of got older, like the anxiety, I was having panic attacks, severe depression, like as a teen, um, OCD, like just I had a lot of mental health stuff going on, and they put me on Prozac when I was in like freshman year of high school, and I was on antidepressants for about 10 years through 2017 and on different kinds. Um, and something happened in 2017, and this has always bothered me because I can never figure out like what was the catalyst, and maybe I don't need to know, but it is something that just eats at me, is I actually quit my antidepressants cold turkey. And that was the moment that I first ever felt this feeling of rocking
Can I?
when I was going through withdrawals.
Yeah. So there's a few things I want to say here. One is Bethany has a bird on her shoulder. So if you hear bird noises and you're listening to the podcast, it's literally there is a bird in the room with us.
There's two. The other one is being noisy over there.
Okay.
I can put her in the other room if she gets too much.
Yeah. So the second thing is Bethany's describing a really common experience from childhood of feeling this sort of lack of safety and belonging and lovability and worthiness. And so
Mhm.
then the body and the mind and the little human being does all of its best to cope. And a lot of it is protection, defense, fear mechanisms, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And when we have this undigested life experience living in our body, it can manifest somatically, sore
Mhm.
throat, dry lips, itchy skin, upset eating, tinnitus, vertigo, headaches, all of these things. So then Bethany describes a really common strategy of medicating it, numbing it, suppressing it, antidepressants, anti-anxieties. So then we may not be so aware of all the clutter and undigested stuff in our body because we're literally severing that mind-body connection to a degree. So then as we take ourselves off the meds in whatever way we do, it's a personal sovereign choice. Um, we're then re-engaging the mind-body highways and all of that undigested life experience that hasn't been felt, it's been repressed or suppressed for really good reason. Because when we're young, we don't have the skills and tools to feel through intensity and make sense of it unless we have an adult securely attached role modeling. So it makes good sense that we hold it in the body and repress or suppress. So now we're older, we're a little bit more stable, more mature. We can ask questions, we can be autonomous, we've got autonomy. We take ourselves off the drugs, we're suddenly feeling again, and that's when the body starts releasing all of this accumulated data from the body that's subconsciously held in our connective tissues, in our muscles, in our neural maps. It releases that up the pipelines and up the highways into our conscious awareness. And what does that look like? Headaches, tinnitus screaming, dizziness, vertigo, changes to our appetite, insomnia, depression, anxiety. We're actually feeling all of that backlog of life. And interestingly enough, Bethany, I hear quite a few people say that, I was on a holiday, I was relaxed. And, I had this huge kind of vestibular migraine attack or something. And so it's often when we're grounded, when we're relaxed, when we're older, when we're mature, when we are actually in a strong place in our lives, that these symptoms come forward because the body is going, you know what? You're not in the fry pan anymore. You have a little window of opportunity here to release this data from the body, to process it, digest it, metabolize, integrate it. So it really brings it to the forefront. And if we have been in a position of sort of ignoring, avoiding, suppressing, denying, not understanding, it can be an intense flood.
Mhm.
And hopefully, with the Rocksteady skills and tools, I try and give people that opportunity to make it more of a gentle drip feed process where that data is being released every day in small, gentle amounts. So the body's getting emptied. And as
Mhm.
we empty ourselves of that old data, that old repressed, suppressed, undigested, difficult life circumstances, little by little, we make more sense. Our body makes more sense. Our life makes more sense. Our internal sensations and intuitions make more sense. We come home to ourself, to our center, and we're able to think clearly, stand tall, and move through life with a different sense of clarity. So I just wanted to sort of put that into an overarching narrative for the listeners because I'm really, really confident most people will relate at some level.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, the reason why because I know it's not advised to like quit meds like that cold turkey after you've been on them a long time. And the reason why I did that is because I had so many side effects from these medications that dizziness wasn't really one of them ever, but just I was they didn't make me feel good and I didn't want to be on them. And like I was put on them at such a young age that like over 10 years as I grew up, like I was like, my mind and body are disconnected in the sense that like I don't resonate with medication. I don't want to be on it. Like, and so I was really struggling at the time with the specific med I was on, and I just was like, I'm done. And I know that was probably silly, and it definitely threw me into like a spiral. Um, but that's how it happened, and that's just part of my story. But that was in like October of 2017, and then January of 2018. So just a few months later, that rocking that I felt that came on after I like stopped these meds never went away. And it's just kind of been there ever since kind of thing. Now it's a bit different, but I mean, this was a day in, day out. Like I wake up, I go to bed with it. It's here all the time.
Like you're
And
in a hammock on a boat, that kind of,
just, yeah, like it was more like horizontally, like side to side.
yeah.
Um, and like you could visually see me at times where I would be like standing, like I had like a sway happening that I obviously wasn't consciously doing.
And
Um,
just for listeners, sometimes we can lean into that. So sometimes this quote unquote symptoms, which we call sensations in Rocksteady,
mhm,
can be a little piece of wisdom from the body. If we zoom back to little Bethany, who's in a traumatized situation, feeling lots of fear, needing lots of protection, wanting love and belonging, as a mother, often what we do is hold our children and rock them.
and wrong.
And the
Yeah.
rocking is a really soothing proprioceptive tool to allow the brain to settle into this kind of mother child rhythm. And so
Mhm.
for some of my clients with débarquement or PPPD, where they have this constant rocking feeling, I get them to actually leverage that by exacerbating it and consciously rocking themselves to help the brain learn that it's a safe signal and that it's a soothing signal and that it's something we can lean into with a new relationship, that it's actually a sign of self-care and grounding, as opposed to rejecting that signal and wanting sort of this concrete straightness, which is something many vestibular clients are seeking to be more like a statue.
Yeah.
But as you know, when we go into our body and close our eyes and stand in different positions, we're all over the place. Micro movement is normal and healthy. And the stronger our vestibular system, the more we can freely move away from our center fearlessly. So seeking to be strong, tall, like a statue is actually a very misleading and unhelpful goal. So I think it's really useful to sort of bring it into the practical as well.
Yeah. Um, so that was my biggest symptom, really. And then in January of 2018, I started actually falling. Like I was having falls and I was like, what is going on with me? Like, and that's when a lot more fear came in and I'm like, okay, like something's really wrong. Something is wrong. Like I had my like perception of like distance and space was so off. Like I was constantly like whacking into the doorways when I was walking. Like I had no like in the car, like everything was just it
I
was
get it.
bad.
I actually relate to
Um
that. I relate to that
yeah.
personally. When I'm full of data, and there's a lot of neural signals like synapsing furiously in my body. It's like I will walk into walls, or it's really difficult to drive a car. And so
Yes.
I need to have strategies to empty that data out of my body, clear myself, which now is no problem I mean, I have the skills and tools now, but I had to learn how to literally re-engage my proprioceptive touch system, which you've now done through Rocksteady. And notice that when I lose myself and my body and I'm in my mind and I'm rushing 10 steps ahead of myself, I lose those coordination skills and I can
Hmm.
fall over.
Yeah.
And so it really is a coming home to the felt sense of the body and not over mentalizing things or becoming too visual. We need to feel our way through the darkness, which is really a pretty central part of
Scary.
the study. Yeah,
It can be scary when you don't know what's going on, and this is like this is a new experience.
very cool.
I was convinced like something like severely, like there was something really bad happening. And then I was having it was everything. It was just like a cascade effect happened, and this rocking, this constant dizziness. I had a lot of like visual
Yeah.
stuff going on. I was very like visually overstimulated. I really couldn't drive for a long time. Um I would just have breakdowns in the car and be pulled over on the side of the highway. And
I've
like
been there. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It honestly makes a lot of sense because our bodies are carrying all this sensory data. You know, if we even put all the emotional stuff aside and the mental backlog of life, you know, paying bills and relationships, but all the visual data, the hearing data, the balance data, the touch data, the smells, the taste, there's so much going on that when we're not connected to our bodies because we dissociate or we leave ourselves to, you know, not be in the pain, which is all normal and healthy, which by the way is kind of a big problem, just to validate that feeling you had, like there is a big problem here, something is wrong.
yeah.
In my opinion, when we are not in our body, inhabiting our human body, yeah, that is a problem. Like that's not okay. Like we want everyone on the planet in their own lane, in their own center, mind, body, breath connected. And I think these sensory experiences of tinnitus, vertigo, dizziness, anxiety, depression, insomnia, they are actually the body saying, come home, we need you. So it all does actually make sense. And I also wanted to validate going cold turkey off the medication. Well done. Like you listen to your body, you follow through. There is no rules here. There's lots of external guidelines and recommendations, but you are you and you know you. And if that's what your body strongly intuitively suggests you do, well done for so bravely walking into the pit of the fire and meeting that intensity and taking yourself on that journey. That is sovereignty, that is autonomy, that's self-authority, that's self-permission, and that is exactly what I'm about. So I think
Yeah.
really congratulate you for being audacious.
I really appreciate that because it's actually something I've kind of struggled with a bit recently because I've had a lot of pressure to go back on medication. And I'm on two meds right now, which we'll get to, but like, I never could go back on antidepressants. And when I made that decision, it always seemed silly saying it out loud,
Mm.
but I felt that that move and doing that was like the biggest promise I had ever made to myself. I promised in that moment, I was like, I will never take another one of these drugs again, ever. I will never do this again.
Mm.
Um, and
Powerful.
I stuck to that until I got pressured last year, I think, and I had horrendous side effects. I had hallucinations, which I've never experienced before in my life. Like my overall experience with these drugs has been negative. And I had a moment of weakness. I caved in and like I felt like I kind of like failed myself in that moment because I made such a huge promise that I really felt with all of my being. And then in a moment of despair, I was just like, I'm in a bad space. I need to try something. And when I say bad space, I'm not even talking, a lot of these drugs were being prescribed to me for the dizziness stuff,
Yeah, I
which
understand.
had anxiety and depressive
And it's
side effects,
isolating
if you
and
will.
it's
Yeah.
lonely and there's just this huge existential, you know, dark cave of like,
Yes.
who do I turn to?
Yes.
And we turn to drugs, we turn to devices, crutches. We are trained to look outside of ourselves for the answers instead, which is the rock steady mantra really, is instead of looking outside of ourselves, can we gently redirect our gaze inwards and reconnect and breathe through the discomfort and wait until things make sense?
Hmm.
Staying present with ourselves is hard, especially when it's so intensely uncomfortable. And I
Yeah.
believe it's an absolute rite of passage for all humans.
Yeah, I think, and I will be candid, that is the area I still struggle with because I went to the depths of like I I went to a place that was so dark with all of this and got so many diagnoses. I got so much medical trauma on top of stuff that I already had lifelong.
Mm.
Uh, and I get caught up at times still where I will be having bad symptom days or weeks or a month or even, and when I get like that, it's almost like a kind of ingrained in me to like react and like go back to that, and I have to call a doctor. There's something wrong, like something's going on, and almost like it just keeps fueling it. And like I'm much more conscious of it now, and I can recognize when I'm doing that, and I'm like, no, 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 like this is going to bring me more anxiety reaching out to them.
Pause there and celebrate that, because that is the stuff that changes the brain. When we can see our challenges and be frank about it, and we develop these kind of unhelpful habits that we've probably developed in childhood. So they've developed from a place of not having all the information, not really being well informed. And so that idea of booking an appointment, reaching for the expert, abnormalizing ourselves, they're all very well established highways in our body. We have done that a million times, over a million times, over a million times. So it's really familiar, and there's comfort in the predictability of it, the familiarity of it. But once we can step back, like you've just beautifully described, and say, that is going to cause me more pain. It's like, I know that pathway. I can lean into it easily, except I kind of know the end game is unhelpful. And so to simply pause and see that and give yourself the autonomy, the self permission, the self authority to potentially make a different choice in that moment, that is neuroplasticity, where we hold back, perhaps, take a
Right.
breath, stay with
Mhm.
the discomfort, maybe try one of our other physical, mental, emotional, spiritual practices and resources. And we car park that old habit a little bit longer each time, knowing
Yeah.
we'll fall back on the bandwagon at some point, and then we have to have
Yeah.
self-compassion and pick ourselves up again, and it's a process.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think kind of going back to like the trajectory here, I was having falls at the beginning of 2018, and then in April of that year,
Mm.
I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, and I had a tick bite about a year or two um prior. I think it was about a year, and they didn't want to treat me for it because I didn't have a rash or anything,
Mm.
and then it was not long after that that I started having a lot of like other symptoms. Like I was getting daily like low grade fevers. I always just felt sick and run down. Um, I had like night sweats. I was very nauseous. My stomach, like I had a lot of like body stuff going on that like I felt sick. And I get this positive Lyme test. I also tested positive for several other like tick-borne illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that just sent me down like, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the US, Lyme disease is such a controversial thing, and that is extremely confusing for the patient. When this is new and you don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's even worse in Australia. They deny it completely.
okay, so there's kind of like two entities with Lyme here, and it's like you're in one or the other, and like that's your belief, and there's no in between, and it's
Very,
messy, but
very confusing.
it's very confusing. It leaves you to do a lot of guesswork and assumption, which is not helpful. It's sends you down kind of, you're just spinning your wheels. You want more answers. You want more concrete answers. You're not getting them because it's not like a concrete thing. And like,
The
you
goose
keep
chase.
going and going. And like, and then they prescribe you so many antibiotics. And that causes so many other problems. And so I fell down this Lyme rabbit hole without wanting to, obviously. And I followed it because that was the first time I felt like I had a concrete, I was diagnosed with something. This is what's causing all of my problems.
It was a foothold. And you know
Yes.
what? It is important, and I say this frequently. I mean, my main realm of genius is the mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of
Mhm.
neural mapping and whatever. But it's super important to listen to our physical body, to get physical diagnoses, to have the investigations, and to follow through with things. I mean, if we have a bacterial infection, of course, try antibiotics, and to be quite practical about some of those straightforward physical treatments. And alongside that, also to have the mental, emotional, spiritual maturity and capacity to be aware of our nervous system. And even what you described on the intense confusion of different diagnoses, different doctors, different treatment models, that's a lot of data that the body is juggling. And confusion is a sign we're holding on to stories and information that doesn't belong to us. So we have to understand how to have the mental, emotional, spiritual process of releasing that confusion and coming back to our own center and clarity. Because as you're saying, it just adds layers of trauma,
Yeah,
which
it
is,
does.
I mean, I've been there.
Counterproductive.
Probably most people listening have been there. And um, it's so much more than the diagnosis. It's how can I be the best version of me? How can I clear myself of all these invisible inputs, the
Mhm.
stories, the ideas, the fears, the narratives, the politics, the climate,
Right.
the cultural
Mhm.
assumptions. How can I clear myself of all of this clutter so that I know who I am as Joey or who you are as Bethany, and we can make those more clear thinking decisions and feel inner peace.
Yeah.
We're not warring with the outer world, inner world,
Yeah.
outer world.
And so speaking to the medical side of things, I think that there is and I'm saying this from very lived experience at this point, I think there is a huge, obviously, need and place for modern medicine, but I also think it can be extremely damaging. And
Yeah.
I unfortunately fell down that path. The amount of unnecessary medications and antibiotics that I took caused me more issues. I later got something called C. diff, which is like an intestinal infection.
Mm.
Um, at my lowest point, I was 83 pounds. Like I was very, very sick. Like I had lost my job. I could barely move. Like I just existed on the couch and that was my life. Like
I just
I was very ill.
I just want to say it's remarkable that you're here today sharing this story. So I really want to see you and validate you on
Thank
that strength. You clearly have a fire within your belly. I've got goosebumps. And just to really reiterate, I've thought a lot about this stuff, right? A lot of deep contemplation. And I really feel like Indigenous cultures have it sorted with how they have such a strong sense of identity, and like literally from birth, ancient Indigenous cultures in Australia, for example, the new child is given like animal or plant songline stories, narratives, identity that help anchor them into who they are and what their role is. And when we know ourselves, when we are contained in our body, when we trust what we sense and feel, and when we have a direct relationship with the ecosystem around us, that we understand the inner world, we understand the outer world, we understand beyond the physical and the sort of the spiritual and the ancestral, we really have protection and power. Because if people come and give us hocus pocus narratives and stories, they just bounce off us because we know who we are. So there's a huge amount of neural protection or protection from some of this internal warring. when we know who we are. And the modern day Western world that you and I have been born into, I mean, we're fed to the lions. We're not told who we
Yeah.
are, or we're told how we should be. And
Could
we
be.
get sucked into this capitalist consumerist culture where every single day of our lives, we're effectively at the shopping mall with bright lights blinding us, trying on every outfit, trying to see what feels good, what looks good, who am I? And we do it over and over again. So our life force is literally draining out of our body as we try and figure out what our role is on the planet. Where do I fit in the ecosystem?
Mhm.
And those narratives of I'm not enough, I'm abnormal, I need a fix, I'm weak. You know, we become very vulnerable to things like the medical narrative because we are
Mhm.
seeking certainty, we are seeking
Right.
positionality. So
That
this idea of actually holding all the medical stuff lightly, understanding that the medical system itself has its own trauma, you know, in the modern day world, there is all of the potential for trauma begetting trauma and re-traumatization. But if we can look at ourselves as a whole person with values, with instinct, with impulse, with a sense of unique soul expression, if we can explore our authentic self more fully, we actually protect ourselves because we know who we are. And
Mhm.
that again is the rock steady process of going way beyond the medical and really deeply into those inner layers of self where we can hold steady and anchored and
Yeah.
we can survive basically the shitstorm of the world outside.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Like I said, I look back on the whole experience with a lot more wisdom, and I wish I could go back and kind of save my younger self in a lot of those scenarios. Because there was so much added trauma that didn't need to happen. And that really only happened because, so I don't want to take away from the fact I do believe that I was acutely very sick with Lyme, whatever other bacteria was going, like there, I had positive tests. I physically, you could see it, like I was very, very unwell. Um, but I think I held on to that for too long.
And that makes sense.
I,
And that's okay. And, you know, we get to where we get to at the time we're ready to get there.
yeah. Um, so I, I went down that path. And I think also when I lost so much weight and I had gotten like, when I was at my lowest point physically and gotten like, I was very sick. I think that kind of caused more like, I say diagnoses and I kind of use that lightly, but it did cause more health issues after that. Um, and so the dizziness stuff got a lot worse, a lot worse.
Can,
Um,
can I ask a clarification question there?
mhm.
Are you saying that when you got the diagnostic labels in the vestibular world, that then your relationship to the vestibular symptoms amplified?
My gut response was yes to your question. Um,
Because in a sense, where attention goes, the neurons grow. So it's like if we have more
exactly.
attention there, we get amplified volume and intensity, which is why it's
So
so important we don't talk too much about tinnitus and things because we can end up
yes.
overemphasizing it. It's
Well,
safe,
and
but
that was a problem because I fell in that, like I was, the dizziness was probably my main like symptom that was the most problematic for me and the one that was truly like affecting my day to day.
mm,
Um I was sick with a lot of stuff going on, but that was the one that I was hyper focused on.
yeah.
Um and that was the one that I kept chasing further. And everyone kept saying, "Oh, you're dizzy because of Lyme disease and all these things." And I did buy into that for a long time, but then it became a bit unclear because like I said, Lyme is such a controversial thing. And I'm like, well, do I still have Lyme disease if I've treated it? Like, do I have like kind of like long COVID? Do I have like chronic Lyme now? And like I don't know. Like, and so there was a lot of confusion, but this dizziness was where my attention was and I wanted it gone. It was like
Mm.
I said, I got laid off. I actually I was on disability. I am still today. I just recently started a job for the first time in 6 years, so I'm trying to transition back into reality. But I do
Being
still
sick,
struggle.
being sick is still reality. And if we go back to the
Yeah.
indigenous ancient cultures, sick people were tended to and cared for and accepted as valid community members. It is still living, and it's okay to be sick. You know, it's a rite of passage. And how beautiful that you've stayed the path. And my perspective, by the way, of the long COVID or the Lyme disease and the dizziness is when we go through these intense illnesses and it shakes our system up and probably changes some of our neural maps, which is fine. We're humans, we're adaptable, we're
Mhm.
resilient. Then we have to do the work to actually rebuild our new normal sense of balance.
Right.
We have to actually come back into the body and reset our our balance signals, our sensory maps. So those sicknesses can agitate the system. And if we don't have the skills and tools to use neuroplasticity and rebuild it, it can become a chronic
Yeah.
system mismatch. And no one's
Yeah.
really talking about that so much.
No, and I think that with that, um it's just like you said earlier, the more focus you give it to, it becomes bigger.
Mm,
But I because I was like acutely sick and I had like a lab result and I'm like, this is what's going on. I also had the mindset back then. I'm like, oh, so there should be a medication for this, right? There should be like a fix, like a quick fix. This came on very quickly. There should be a fix you can give me. And so I was desperately searching for that. Which led me to, I started vestibular, like physical therapy, vestibular rehab. Um, I actually know my physical therapist at the time, this was actually it was like 2019 going into COVID. So it was a weird time.
mhm,
Um, he never told me like with words. He never said you have triple PD, but I later asked for my medical records and I read it in there. And I was like, what is this? And I had to ask them. I was like, what is this? And so it was weird because I like accidentally found out. He didn't diagnose me like in person with anything.
mm,
He just told me that I had like a weakened vestibular system. They hooked me up to this big machine. I was like strapped in and the floor plates kind of moved and it calibrated. Like, I don't know, it was kind of wild. Um,
and I
but I
want
found,
and I want to say my perspective is it's not a weakened vestibular system. Often triple PD comes with an impeccably healthy vestibular system, but the arrangement and the connection between those healthy balance signals and how the brain and body are connecting them and using them, there's a disconnect there. And often that's that what we were talking about, the dissociation of not really living in the body, living life from the
Mhm.
mind, trying to think our way through everything instead of actually pausing, breathing, going into our feet, into our pelvis, feeling our way literally more like an animal. And then those signals, the healthy ear signals, get reintegrated and reset. So again,
Yeah,
body scanning, body scanning, body scanning. It's not a mental process. It's
yeah.
physical sensory reintegration.
Hmm. So I think that was a another catalyst moment. I saw this triple PD thing, then I went on the Google search and I was like, what is this? And I'm like, oh my God, this is me. This is literally me. And then this became my new identity. I was like, I don't really identify so much with Lyme at this point. Now I have this thing. And like, what's the solution for this thing? And like some doctors want to prescribe antidepressants, um, which I was very against at the time.
Mm,
Um, and then there was some talk about because I've had ever since probably high school, I have had a traditional migraine history. Um, never with like a vestibular component, but I would have like aura and like
mm,
so I had a migraine history from younger. And then there was some question. I went to like an ENT and they were like, oh, you have vestibular migraine. And then I also was diagnosed with Meniere's, but that was later. They were like, nope, you don't have that. And then it
so
was
confusing.
MDdS was thrown in there as well. And I was like, oh, this also makes sense. But I was like, I never went on like a boat. But then she was like, you don't really have to go on a boat to have it. And I was like, what? And then after that, I started like I had a few acute actual episodes of BPPV, and that was the first time ever I had true spinning vertigo, and that sent the fear signals spiraling.
Yeah.
I was so, I always had this like, it was like impending doom. I was like, if my dizziness ever turns to true spinning vertigo, like I can't handle it. I don't want it. I can't do that. And when it happened, I had like a meltdown. It was like,
I can actually feel the fear in my heart while I'm listening to you say.
yeah,
But just for
yeah,
listeners out there, BPPV is the best kind of vertigo. It's treatable, it's brief. Yes, it's intense. Yes, it's visual. Yes, it's quote unquote true vertigo as opposed to vague, dizzy feelings in the head or the body. So BPPV is you can see your eyes moving.
right.
It's a physical, mechanical issue of calcium carbonate particles moving around the incorrect parts of the ear, but we can treat that. And the BPPV video kit's included in the Rocksteady program because 1 in 4 people get it. It's incredibly common. It can come and go. And you guessed it, you can have BPPV on top of triple BD or vestibular migraine. You can have comorbidities. And so it's really important to understand what is BPPV, how do I gracefully, quickly, and effectively treat it? Because it can be very scary and debilitating, more the fear of it than the actual spinning, which is usually less than 30 seconds.
Hmm.
And it's triggered by like bending over or laying down. So we can, to a certain extent, mitigate it. But the gold standard is to literally understand it, know which ear it is, and treat it. And then it's done.
So when I got the Rocksteady program, I did all the testing and I never had BPPV back then. I had never experienced it yet. And I was so thankful for it. Like even when you would talk about it in the videos or if it would get mentioned somewhere, it immediately sent me panicking. I was like, I can't have that. I can't get that. Like, and then the first time it happened, the initial, I guess, onset or feeling of the spinning, you're right, like did not last very long. But my panic
Yeah.
that ensued like right after just amped the whole thing up. And like, I mean, it sent like all day. I was like,
Which again, if we look at it sort of from the like the hindsight, the wisdom of hindsight, and if we look at the overarching common human ground story, when you've been a little child with lots of fear, lots of uncertainty, lots of this somatic expression, whether it's the throat or the stomach or the migraines,
mhm,
which, by the way, side topic, if you happen to be an empathic, high sensitive, emotional being from birth, you're
mhm,
instantly sucking up a lot of data. There's a lot of invisible input that you're taking in every day, especially around human beings. And
mhm,
that's a lot to manage. So I also got migraines because I didn't know how to manage my high sensitivity. So
mhm,
there's common ground there. So as we get scared of the body, we get scared of what we're feeling from a young age.
mhm.
Fast forward that into being an adult and then having these intense, scary sensations. It triggers all of that fear in the body. Can I trust the body? And they've come all the way back from childhood. So we're dealing with this sort of trauma story
Yeah.
effectively. And we're learning how to go to shift our relationship to our body, to shift our relationship to our sensations. And as we meet that intensity with center, anchor, groundedness, and grace, the neural pathways change. And then we're not afraid of ourselves anymore, or at least it lessens with time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to pick and choose what probably is the most relevant, but I would just say like as a whole. So when I got all of these dizzy diagnoses,
Yeah.
all of them, I got I thought I'd feel better having answers, but I got more overwhelmed because I had so many doctors that had so many different opinions. I had a specialist in every area. I had a regular neurologist. I had like a vestibular neurologist down in Boston who was like a vestibular migraine like specialist. He sent me through a bunch of vestibular testing with the rotary chair and the caloric testing, which he said that I had weakened vestibular function in one of my ears. So now I'm like, oh, there is a real problem. But then I later found out he was like, well, actually, if you're really nervous, that test isn't like always 100% accurate. Like
None,
you're,
none of the vestibular tests are that conclusive.
yeah. And so I'm like, well, and so I don't know. I like I said, I had a specialist in every area. I had a gastro doctor, I had ENT, I had an endocrinologist, I had a rheumatologist. Like I had everyone, everyone.
which is not
cardiologist.
which is not necessarily helpful because everyone we
No,
speak to gives us more data, gives us more clutter, gives us more
exactly.
suggestive work. So it makes
It
our
was
harder.
I would love to take this moment to say it was 100% not helpful. And if anyone
And it's
gets anything from
expensive.
this,
It's
it's
expensive, right?
I was just going to say that if anyone gets anything from this, I will say in 2 years from the point that I got laid off from work, probably about 2 years, I had tallied up all of my expenses and was keeping track of it. I had spent over $40,000 on because a lot of this stuff, especially with Lyme, a lot of stuff was not covered by insurance. A lot like naturopathic doctors, supplements, a lot of that stuff was out of pocket. I also was so desperate for healing in any regard after I got all the diagnoses. I'm like, I don't even know which one to pick, but if someone has something, I'll do it. I'll do anything. And like I did a bunch of experimental treatment in New York City that was really a waste of money and just added more trauma, medical trauma. I had a lot of procedures done to me that added more trauma. I really think that our medical system is flawed in the sense of like having to be awake during procedures while they're cutting and doing things. Like that's just so
Can I ask you, and thank you for
wild.
sharing this because it is important. And I frequently see people in my Rocksteady community say things like they've spent $80,000 before
Yeah.
coming to Rocksteady.
Mhm.
I can speak to this, but it might be more powerful if you speak directly to it. Can you just draw a line in the sand and talk about how the Rocksteady program is different to all of these medical procedures?
Yeah, so I think once you realize and you stop searching, and like I said, I still get caught up still to this day. I slide back a little and feel like I'm,
Normal. I do too.
but
I do too.
I once you have clarity and finally remove yourself from it. So I had just said this year to my therapist, I was like, this is I've had a full year where I've not gone to any specialist or had any antibiotics. And we were like celebrating that in therapy. And I was like, I have been so removed from the medical system in the last year and have really only I've continued vestibular physical therapy and regular therapy. So that's all I've been doing in the last year. Um, but doing rock steady, like I wish I could have connected with myself and had these real moments, uh, obviously before spending all that money and going down all these paths with so many doctors they all have different opinions. No one views it the same way, which is really confusing for the patient. And then you're left to decide, which just spirals you more.
Yeah.
And something that was really disconnected for me is these symptoms were really scary. I did not want to feel them. And so when I did feel them and it was like a chronic thing, I was just so panicked. And so initially with like the body scans and trying to start there, I could not shut my eyes. I couldn't do it. I like immediately panic. The room starts moving and like my eyes pop right open. I'm like, I can't. And I would get very weird, like if I didn't have arms on the chairs, like I felt like I was just gonna fall out or like
Because your body and quote unquote your inner child or those very young neural maps, they're seeking safety.
Mhm.
And we kind of have to feel through the mud. We have to lose our balance to find our balance. And there's just for those listening, there are a lot of tricks and tips and tools to help you get into the body scan because it can be a titrated process, which means tiny, gentle steps of just a
Mhm.
few seconds at a time and eyes open or eyes closed or leaning against the wall or laying on the floor, having
Yeah.
anchor points to come back into, really deeply sensing our steadiness in a very authentic way. So we're not imagining it, we're actually feeling steady somewhere, whether it's our big toe or our hips, but
Yeah.
having tools to actually stay in the body in a way that's genuinely not flooding. Um,
Mhm.
and I also have that experience in the past of feeling the panic in my body and, having to titrate myself back into me.
Well, and I will say too, with the program, I was really discouraged at first because body scan was introduced pretty quickly, and I felt like I couldn't do it. And I was so overwhelmed by everything going on in my life and all these symptoms, where I was at mentally, physically, not working, just as a whole, I was so overwhelmed. And this just felt like another thing that I was like, I can't even do it. I can't even do it right. Like, and so I did struggle with that first. But yeah, the fear was just so ingrained, and I wanted to escape these symptoms so desperately that I could not lean into them at all. But I think like the shift started happening like once I started to like get curious, and there was some days where I was downright mad, and like I would curse out how I was feeling, or I would just get so pissed and be like, give me all you have right now. Like
I think
I
that's
am so
expressive.
over it.
That's
Like
beautiful.
like I would just get so frustrated and be like, I've had it. Like,
The,
so
the
give
line.
me the worst you've got. So I would have moments like that, but I think once I started kind of leaning into it a bit more and getting a bit more curious and slowly, this was not quick. And I still struggle, and I won't lie about that. I do, but it was very slow. And I really had to like be in a place where I felt safe, first of all.
Yeah.
Um,
And just to say, when there's all that $40,000 worth of medical stuff and investigation and external clutter happening alongside Rocksteady, it's not a good fit,
mhm,
because Rocksteady requires us to be really present with ourselves. And when we're cluttered with all the confusing ideas, we can't concentrate. Like, we have to create that space and that emptiness, which is why ideally before you start Rocksteady, you have medical clearance and you trust the doctor that says, look, I can't find anything that suggests you have like an immediate medical emergency. I may not be able to explain why you feel what you feel, but I also can't provide you with sort of some immediate medical treatment. Or like medical clearance means like your MRI is clear, your blood tests are clear, you have adequate hearing and balance function. And so then from that place, you can say, okay, there's no kind of sinister cancer or stroke or something that is a red hot flag that needs medical instant attention. Then we step into this place of mysterious diagnosis. Nobody can really explain it, and that's tricky. But if we can rest the Goosechase down and then rest into Rocksteady as a process that will support us through the unknown, that's very powerful. So to be goose chasing and attempting Rocksteady, I would say, is not the greatest combination. Just the
it wasn't.
mentally, it's explosive.
It wasn't because I was still chasing while I got Rocksteady, which is how I found you truly, because I was going on Google and I was chasing. And maybe that's why my journey took a bit longer with it. And like I was very frustrated, but I was also still getting a lot of different input happening. I was also later diagnosed with POTS.
Yeah.
I had done like the whole tilt table test and that whole thing. And so POTS, vestibular migraine, and chronic Lyme disease, if you want to believe that. Um, all were diagnoses, and triple PD were kind of the general air, and the conversations with the doctors were, this is something you're just going to have to live with. Like it doesn't get better. This is your new normal. And like
Oh, I can feel
there's
my blood boiling. It's
I
misinformation,
had
people. It's misinformation.
It's misinformation, and it is the most harmful message that you can give a patient as a doctor, to give them no hope. That's what I was struggling with. They gave me no hope, and that right there, like I will be sensitive in what I'm about to say, but 2021 was definitely the hardest year. This
Mhm.
all really started the end of 2017, 2018, but 2021 things really took a turn. When I got the POTS diagnosis, I had a very confrontational experience with the cardiologist that gave me that diagnosis. I had a complete meltdown in the office. He gave me the way he presented it, the way he diagnosed me, he had no tact, he had no empathy, he had nothing, and was just like, it is what it is kind of thing. And I said to him, I was like, if this is how the rest of my life is going to be, I do not want to be here.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where that is the only option I saw. And it went so far as like I went to an attorney, I had a will written up, like I had like planning. and I was done because I had no hope from no doctor at all
Why
gave
didn't
me
you
a
bring this to
thread.
the Rocksteady monthly live calls? Like, this community is like right there. And I want to say, and I spoke to another client about this recently, sometimes the help and the hope is there. And there's something inside of us that is not taking up. It's like the universe is handing us these people, the universe is handing us this community, the universe is handing us these rich skills and tools. And there's a part of us going, no. And we keep going into the goose chase or the fear because of the familiarity. And this is our self autonomy, self authority, self permission. Sometimes it is there. And we
Mhm.
have to learn to lean into the help and the support. And it's vulnerable, it's very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Um,
But I just like, I almost plead with anyone listening, and if this is resonating with anyone,
yeah.
stop the goose chase. Don't keep seeking out specialists. If you are generally healthy and you have,
I think getting the MRI clear is a good,
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
good baseline. You know, you may
and
not
like,
have cancers, but if you have a clear MRI, we're pretty confident
yes.
that your brain's well, and
Mhm.
that's what I would say is a gold standard mark of clearance.
Yeah, and I mean, I had MRIs, I had CAT scans. I mean, I got to the point where I was seeing a neurosurgeon again down in Boston about possibly like it's called like Chiari malformation and like possible like surgery on my skull. And like I was looking for like, and I can only imagine if I did something like that and how that could have affected me long term if that really wasn't what was going on. Like,
Everyone's everyone's
don't,
doing their best, and
yeah.
the doctors are working under a linear patriarchal system, which is
Mhm.
all about problems and fixes.
In their own lane, which is very specific and
Yes.
doesn't look at the whole body picture at all.
Actually, it's not even the whole body, it's the whole Bethany. We need to know your joy. We need to know your pleasure. We need to know your special interests. We need to know your fears. We need to know your worries. We need to know all about you so we can integrate your neural maps. This is a Bethany process. And that was what frustrated me when 10 years ago, when I was in the university hospital system, nobody was looking at the whole person. And it just literally made no sense to me, which is why I went off and created my own way of being with clients. But, you know, even just circling back to POTS, you can have POTS and have an amazing life. You may need to eat more frequently and drink more hydrolytes. You may need to have good body scanning and postural techniques to strengthen the core muscles and allow the blood flow to move more elegantly. But there's a lot you can do to maximize the body that you have. And
Mhm.
same with neurodivergence and sensitivities and high empathy and even a mind that is desperately seeking answers. That's a kind of thing we're born with. And we can leverage that. We can understand how to make best use of the brain and body we have if we're in an environment that says, hey, let's take off the masks. Let's actually meet this vulnerability. Let's talk about our dreams, our needs, our wishes, our desires, our fears, and let's take this one step at a time to be that whole person and to welcome in all these parts. And the medical world is just simply not the place for that process. But often that's where people are turning and putting their money, dead ended, disillusioned, deflated. It's hard.
And no hope. That's the biggest one because
Essentially, yeah.
that right there was the thing that finally sent me. And I was like, that was my tipping point. And I'm like, if you're telling me that I'm going to live like this for the rest of my life, I'm going to feel this dizzy, no balance, disconnected, floating through space, not like all the feelings I was feeling, having limitations of like I can't even like drive freely, like I was relying on a lot of like people for rides and like felt like I lost myself and my independence and like I'm an only child. I have only child syndrome. I'm very independent. So like losing that was a lot and that interaction with that doctor was just my tipping point and I was like I can't live like this and I was ready to check out. And truly the only reason why I didn't is I have two birds and a cat and like I've had them their whole life.
Yeah.
And like they are my family. They are like my children that I don't have. And it made me sick thinking like leaving them behind and what would happen to them.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do that. And so I've stuck it out and I'm glad I'm here and I'm like I'm on I'm on a better path. I'm much clearer now.
Can ca- can I ask, are you able to body scan yet? Sometimes a little bit at some points. Where are you on that coming home into your body journey? Because it's huge, it's massive, it's central.
I I would say like 70-30
Right.
or like 80-20 even sometimes.
And arguably 100% is enlightenment. So, that's pretty radical if you can say you're at 70 to 80% embodying yourself. That's amazing.
Yeah, I still still sometimes struggle with closing my eyes. Especially if I've had like for example, so yesterday I pushed probably too hard.
Good
I
to
kind of went over my threshold.
Yeah.
Um and so today I've been paying for it a little bit and I haven't felt great. And so when we did a body scan when we initially started this, I like initially closed my eyes and then I felt a whoop, and I had like a moment of panic. But I'm just like, instead of feeding the panic and running with it, I just acknowledged it for a moment and then just was like, okay, I just need to like have my eyes open right now, like, and not like giving it so much energy.
Or we go into the body where our steadiness lives. So for you, that might be in your pelvis or in your feet, and really building that reflex to take our attention in to where the anchor is.
Hmm.
It's like bright, shiny objects when we have the intense sensations or the dizziness that has that huge emotional pull. Can we say hello? Yes. And I'm breathing into the pelvis, I'm breathing into the feet. So we stay in the body, but we redirect it to somewhere that is quote unquote safe and genuine. So
Yeah.
over relying on the eyes and eyes open is also a little trap, actually.
Okay.
So it's something that we have to keep working toward. And these are all things you can bring to the live monthly calls because everyone benefits from these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say like overall, I'm doing a lot better from starting point when the dizziness started. This was all consuming to me. This was my whole life. This was my identity. This was my existence.
Catastrophe.
It was truly just a perpetual hell, really.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say there's been a lot of change. Last fall, I had been engaged and I was with this person for 5 years and I called that off. And there was a lot of anxiety I was living in that relationship, and I knew it was not the right fit. We were not the right match. It brought me a lot of anxiety, but I stayed in it for too long, probably just out of fear, truly. And so last fall was kind of there was a big shift that happened once I finally did that. And I've been living on my own, which is something that I have done over the years, but it's been a while. And so living on my own again, trying to get like, there was some fear around that, that I've since overcome, but kind of getting rid of identifying problem areas for me that I knew were adding to this. I knew were making me feel unsafe. And I don't mean physically, but like just mentally, and were causing me more anxiety. And just I didn't feel seen or heard or validated, and that doesn't create safety. But just like getting removed from those situations and identifying it, there's, like I said, the biggest shift has probably happened since probably September to now. Um, I I don't really I don't always wake up now thinking about the dizziness, which I mean, that's what I've done for 6 years, really.
That's
Um,
that's like let's all pause and take a breath and celebrate moment. And
yeah.
just the self-authority, the self-permission, the autonomy, and also leaving an engagement is huge. And if there is that mismatch, there is a kind of re-traumatization every time we don't leave that relationship, and the body holds the score. So it creates this inner
Right.
conflict. So a lot
Yeah.
of the rock steady process is not the medical.
Mhm.
It's really looking at, okay, what is nourishing me? What in my outer world do I need to feel nourished in my inner world? And
Mhm.
what if my not quite right rocking sensations are not a sign I'm sick or wrong? What if it's
Mhm.
a sign I'm absolutely right and my body's telling me this relationship is not working? The outer
Yeah.
world is rocking me. The outer world is not nourishing me. So once we listen to the sensations, we actually gain that clarity. We gain that map. We have a compass, and we
Mhm.
can make more and more decisions and choices that actually start to weave an internal webbing of comfort, groundedness, clarity,
Yeah.
anchor, steadiness. So it's
Yeah,
huge, really
I
huge.
knew for a long time that it was not the right fit, but like I said, I stayed out of fear, and because I was dealing with so much health stuff, he was really my only, like, support system,
Yeah.
and I was scared to lose that, because I'm pretty introverted. I kind of have always been that way, and so I don't have a huge network, I don't have family where I live, and so, I was scared to be alone and dealing with all this health stuff, but I would notice when we were apart, I was less anxious. When we'd come together, I'd be more anxious, which then in turn I'd get more dizzy, I'd have more symptoms, and, like, there was more happening in my body and in a not pleasant way, and, um,
The
but
unspoken real conversations that you needed to have
yes,
were jolting you. And just
yes,
on a side note for all of our listeners, I've actually done this as well in my past, you know. I did experiments where I canceled my calendar completely for like a month. So
mhm,
I didn't see any friends, I didn't book them in, and I lived in flow, so it was like if I ran into someone down the street, it was fine, but I didn't book anything. And I really had a month of just me. And in that experiment, which it was literally an experiment, a social experiment, I noticed certain people who I craved to see. I yearned for their connection. I missed them. And there
mhm,
was other people that were much more quote unquote toxic for me and my body. And I just wanted more space. It became really clear the people who were nourishing for me and the people who were draining for me. And it was a really great neuroplasticity experiment, which it sounds like you sort of did incidentally as well. So there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned if we become conscious about how we're participating in the world and how we're relating to our inner landscapes as
mhm.
wise, sacred, sensory gifts.
I so I think so my biggest takeaways that I wanna highlight for everyone is so I would say if you've had, like if you've had a trauma history of some sort, if you're a more of an emotional person or, if you identify as like a, highly sensitive person and have that history or you have a lot of anxiety, I really want to and everyone's story is different, but I think that there's some commonalities here that like it can be very detrimental to go down the rabbit hole and keep chasing for answers because at the end of the day it creates more fear, it creates more confusion, it just adds to the muddiness in your head, which is harder to sift through to get clarity. It's financially draining, which is just a whole nother stress. It's scary.
Mm, it's
You can
exhausting.
be put on medications that aren't necessary, which come with their own side effects, which are unpleasant. Um, and I would say listen to your body because I will say,
Yeah.
though I've been pretty removed from the medical system in the last year, I had an acute issue in January or February, and I knew I was like something's wrong, and I listened to that. I knew there was no like question. And that's that's the difference I want to highlight is like your gut, you know if this is coming from something, for lack of better wording, real, or like this is coming from unresolved feeling, emotion that you need to connect with. And like, um, in the moments where I knew there was there was something real going on in my body and I listened, there was a problem. I addressed it, I fixed it, you know, we're done. But
It's
you
almost,
know in your heart and your stomach, you probably already have the answers that you need and like don't question that. Just your gut tells you and just believe that and lean into it and don't get sucked down like this
yeah.
chaotic and scary path um that just adds more junk you have to sift through later. um
And I want to add here. So we have the physical stuff, and by real, I think what Bethany means is it's quantifiable. We can measure it, we can see it, we can talk about
yes,
it as
exactly.
a medical community. The
Yep.
unseen, the
Mhm.
subconscious, the mental, emotional, spiritual, which is really the contribution I've contributed to the field of bringing all of that into the conversation. The unseen diversity within us is our job. And when we're seeking to be understood, to be seen, to make sense, to feel loved, to feel safe, that's our job.
Mhm.
Okay? It's my job to access that in myself. A doctor can't give me that.
Yeah.
And when we stay in our own lane and we have positionality, I can go to a doctor with great boundaries and I'm protected because I know what the doctor's limitations are and I only ask them questions that they're capable of answering. If
Mhm.
I start bringing all of my subconscious wounding and trauma into the doctor's office, I'm super vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then, we can have all of this ongoing exhaustive goose chase. But if I say, actually, I'd like an MRI and I'd like you to interpret that MRI,
Mhm.
they can do that and I can get that information and walk away
Exactly.
because it's
Yeah,
very
and
clear.
I would definitely agree with you here of like, getting that initial scan and, and maybe if you need 1 or 2 extra to really like quiet your mind and like whatever, but don't get all the specialists and get everyone involved because every person, no matter if they're a medical professional or not, everyone has different opinions. We don't all have the same experiences or viewpoints, and it's hard when you have so many
Yeah.
in your
So the Rock Steady program gives you that community support, comprehensive ideas, experiments, practices, tools to navigate physically being in your body, making sense of what you're feeling, the mental, emotional, and spiritual layers and aspects that are likely to come and knock you over the head at some point in the journey, because we are all completely different. You pick and choose what you want when you want. I never tell people that they must do this or that.
Mhm,
And the reality is Bethany knows her body. She's the one with the expertise there, not me.
mhm.
So Bethany knows when to open her eyes and when to close her eyes. That's her expertise. I sit on the sidelines encouraging, yeah, it's really, really useful to lean into those eyes closed moments and play there, explore there. Bethany enacts that in her own way, in her own timing, self paced, with autonomy, authority, self permission. So the Rocksteady program, I think, is a very, very essential support, not only toolkit, but community. And to hear other people going through these challenges and asking similar questions is really validating.
Yeah.
Mm.
I do like, with I know we are almost out of time, but with the I was a little familiar with kind of like the, like internal family systems, um,
Different parts within ourselves.
different parts and like the younger child, the younger you. But I do feel like Rocksteady did highlight that for me a little bit and like really trying to connect with like those hurt or like wounded pieces from like a younger self and like the like self-compassion hands
Mm. Mm.
I don't know what you want to call it. It's not a module, but the little, audio. That one like was extremely helpful to me, which I found I shouldn't say surprising, but like it's a very short audio, but like I felt like that really packs a punch and like so when I had my first MRI when I was going through all of this, I had several. But my first one, I actually laid in that tube and I was so scared. And I remember I laid there and I was like having this internal conversation with this younger part of me. And I was like engaging with this fearful younger self. And I was like, you're okay. You're safe here. Like nothing bad is going to happen here. Like I have you. Like I, as a 31-year-old, like I have you. I'm holding your hand right now. Like when you didn't have that when you were younger, when you felt scared, when you didn't feel safe, like when like you were being put through this medical stuff at a young age and it was scary. Like that was scary for you as a child because you were a child. But like I'm an adult now. I've got you, we're safe, nothing bad's gonna happen here. Like, and then when I do get like heavy symptom or sensation days, like leaning into that a bit more, but I do have a very loud inner dialogue with a younger part of me now that
That
I was not connected to before. Um,
And again, that's all the sense making too, because when our younger neural maps are screaming at us and going, I'm freaking out, I need help, and there's no secure adult anywhere. And when we haven't experienced a secure adult holding us, we don't actually
mhm,
know how to be a secure adult. And so
exactly.
there's this whole journey we go on maturity,
Mhm,
um, of going, well, how do I anchor into my body, into my steadiness, body scan and go, here's my shoulders, here's my hips, here's my legs. Okay, I am physically here right now. I'm not four. And how from that place, how do I listen to the body? Because we don't want to shut it down and be like, oh no, you're fine. That's gaslighting. We want to be able
mhm,
to say, yeah, this is so scary for you. And I'm listening. Tell me
mm,
more. Yeah, you're
yeah,
freaking out. This MRI scan is noisy, isn't it? Tell me more. So we really let the neurons complete the biochemistry process. We want that 4-year-old neural map to actually complete the fear. So
mhm,
it's a really profound process, that takes titration, which means step by step, gentle, gentle. And there will be times when we gaslight ourselves and we go, no, 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 it's fine, it's fine. Enough of that. And that's not helpful, by the way. But we do that. And then we realize, okay, it's coming back again. Oh, stop, stop, stop. Oh, it's coming back again. We have to feel through the 4-year-old neural map. Hold steady, keep feeling, keep breathing. Tell me more, tell me more. And then the body rearranges it, and the 4-year-old doesn't talk to us anymore. We integrate that neural map back into present day.
yeah. Yeah, I think kind of the last thing is like I said, when I had at the height of all this and when all this happened, I was very sick at the beginning. I got laid off from work and I've been on disability. And I still am on disability right now, but I'm trying to transition back into living and working.
Yeah.
But it's a slow transition. I'm only doing part-time right now and I don't want to like overwhelm myself. But I will say that I think a lot of people in this community could it resonate with the self-doubt and a
Yeah.
lot of like negative self-talk. But the chronic like self-doubt, like I can't do this, I just can't do it. And like I once I started feeling a little bit better, I was just like so overwhelmed with taking that initial step to like go back into the
Mm.
world.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I can't, like, what if I fail? What if it like what if this? What da, 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 da. And but I would say like to obviously not um be like too all in, but gently if you are feeling a little bit better, I think you also have to consciously like gently push yourself in those moments because it's very easy to stay stuck in a familiar, even if it's not entirely comfortable, it's known.
That,
And
that's
so, like,
that's all module 3 stuff.
yeah,
It's about
so gently.
gentle awareness, and that, we may not have to drive the car, but can we just go and sit in the car and put the seatbelt on and just get that
Exactly.
feel for being in the car? And then
Mhm,
tomorrow, maybe I'll drive around the block. And we build it up slowly and we acknowledge I want to drive.
mhm.
And the other thing is if I am entering the workforce, to actually have that conversation with myself, I may fail. Like this
Yeah,
may not be an
yeah.
ideal job for me. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean I'm a bad person. It just means that this job may not be nourishing for me. And I'm strong enough in myself to give it a go and
Yes.
pull back if it's not quite right. So really having those big conversations that hold everything lightly, because the reality is we may get fired,
Yeah.
and being
It could all change.
yeah, and walking into that going, I have to be strong enough to be fired. That's
Yeah.
part of being an adult. That's part of being human.
Well,
And
and I think, like, just taking those small steps of, like, once I was starting to feel better, like, I would start just looking online for, like, what was out there for jobs, just l browsing, but never really acting. Then it kind of was like, "Okay, well, maybe I'd send my resume, but maybe not respond," you know? And, like, it was, like, it was very little. And I'm so grateful that I, was approved for disability and was able to get that help when I really, really needed it. I'm, like, forever thankful for that because I know that can be a struggle for some people, and so I was very lucky with that, but I also it's like, it can be a blessing and a curse almost because once it's been a while, like, it's been April this month, it's been 6 years since I initially got laid off from work. And I never in my like wildest dreams thought I would be not working for 6 years. I thought I got laid off work. I'm going to deal with this health issue, this acute health issue, and I'm going to be good in like less than a year. I never thought that this was going to look like this or take this long. And frankly, I think I could have I think it could have been a lot shorter had I not kept chasing and
Yeah.
going down all these paths that made me more anxious, made me more scared, like all this. Um,
Upsetting the nervous system on repeat.
yeah, I think my time frame definitely could have been shortened in hindsight, but this is what it is, and this was my journey. But I think, like I said, it's a blessing and a curse sometimes with disability, because I also feel that I did fall into the trap of like, now this is just a safety net. This is what I know, and this is comfortable. This is comfortably uncomfortable kind of thing. Like I can live on this. I can live like this, but I'm not thriving. I'm just kind of surviving.
And
And so,
I think another part of truly quote unquote healing and truly inhabiting who we are is that creative expression piece. And so being able to channel what we're gathering and learning our lifetime and putting it somewhere. And that ideally is our
and
workspace.
even if you like aren't working, maybe like I was volunteering for a while before I actually did work.
Yeah.
Like go back to work. But like I think it is important to gently push yourself if you are feeling physically like able or mentally curious about wanting to maybe push yourself to find something that you're very passionate about and interested in that's going to make it worthwhile. Even if so, if you are not feeling great, you're still maybe a bit enticed and looking forward to maybe doing it anyway and pushing through those symptoms a little bit and being like, it might be fun. Like I might have a good time. But yeah, I think just be careful to not let yourself just get stuck in a situation where you're in longer than you want to be. And like it definitely, there is something in finding purpose and having like a meaning, whether it's work or a hobby or connection.
Nail on the head,
Yeah,
connection, purpose. We want to feel that we're growing. We want to feel that we're contributing. Who doesn't want to feel that they're contributing to the ecosystem and the planet?
right.
And I think that can make us sick when we're so stuck on the couch, imploding in our symptoms that
Yeah.
nothing's going, nothing's leaving us, nothing's going anywhere. So this idea of pollinating your unique soul expression out into the world is really part of our health. It's the unseen data. It's not physical, it's not muscles and bones, it's my ideas, it's my voice, it's my thoughts. I just want to really reframe to bring it into rock steady language. For me, it's not pushing. We never have to push ever. Force is not required. It's a pull. Let the life around you pull you into it. Let yourself be carried. Like there's a lot out there. And if you are interested in volunteering or applying for a job, let that curiosity pull you into it. Just surrender to the
Yeah.
pull. It's a much more gentle way of being in the world.
Yeah, the surrender, that word specifically, I think is huge, because I think a lot of us can relate to there's so much fight, like an internal fight and like a push against these feelings. Oh, this is scary. I don't want to feel it. Like you're constantly kind of like dodging it. You're like, no, no, I don't want that. Like, and so yeah, surrendering to kind of all of it, like being curious, giving up some of that control, and that frantic need to
And
find
the paradox,
answers.
really,
Like,
paradox.
yeah.
Surrendering the control, like surrendering the need to micromanage,
Mhm.
actually gives us back our control.
Yeah,
So when we give
exactly.
it, we get our life back. So it's all a paradox and it's a journey. Have you got any closing words of wisdom? Maybe you could finish with what has the Rocksteady program most gifted you?
I would say the biggest thing is it connected me back in my body in a way that was not fear-based and um
Yeah.
was more curious, and like I said, it really opened up that door to like the inner child and like younger me, and I'm very fascinated with that, and like the internal family system kind of type of therapy. My therapist and I do IFS, and we do EMDR and trauma work. So I definitely think connecting to different parts of yourselves where you may have gotten stuck and trying to heal them and make them feel safe definitely plays a big role in like your overall present day self. And yeah.
Yeah, it's a really precious process. And when we come back into the body, all of our wounds and traumas and triggers, which are all kind of icky words I'm not really committed to, but our subconscious story, the body holds a score, they
Yes.
come up for us to welcome them home. And we have to feel through
Hmm.
all of that undigested past experience in order to make sense of it and arrive at inner peace. So we can fight, flight, freeze, push, ignore, deny, distract as much as we want. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's still in our body and it's still going to come up. So the
Hmm.
question is, are we ready to start that gentle drip feed process daily using the Rocksteady program and community, or are we going to wait for an intense flood to knock us over and bowl us down and it's full on? So
Yeah.
I think it's I'm always encouraging people to take the gentle route, to let it be
Yeah.
gentle.
And
Yeah.
there's power in community and not feeling alone, because this
Oh,
process can be very scary and isolating.
it's
So
huge.
having that community is very helpful. But yeah, just really like connecting with yourself in ways that you probably haven't before is huge.
Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Bethany. For all of
Yes.
you listening who are curious to meet our community and join in, visit seekingbalance.com.au. I highly recommend you look into our Rocksteady community if you are suffering in any way with feeling lonely, with feeling unsure about your body, with maybe being resonant with the Goosechase or the fighting, flighting, fawning, freezing, being in that clunky relationship with our body is actually really normal and makes so much sense. But if you're ready to change that and you want to feel that you can rest deeply in who you are, get curious about who you are and get to know, though, your authentic values and your sense of pleasure. Um, I often think that Rocksteady really helps us to fine tune our compass to move toward the person we want to be rather than chasing the person that we don't want to be and
Yeah.
constantly kind of beating ourselves up about the things we don't want to feel. And that's really what the medical mainstream system keeps us locked in, that looking behind about all the things we don't like and don't want. And we're very judgmental and abnormalizing. But Rocksteady invites you to just car park that for a moment and look forward toward what you're feeling now and the person you want to be and how you can cultivate those new neural pathways to actually scientifically change the arrangement of your body and get more and more tastes of feeling actual connection, actual steadiness, actual anchor, ground, calm, clear. And they might start with tiny moments of 2 seconds and they build and build and build as your skill set and your capacity and your window of tolerance grows. So yeah, slow and steady might be the closing words of our talk.
Yes, yes, I would say so. And I would just say too that your Rocksteady was the first I first heard about neuroplasticity, and you like I the fascination like immediately, and it just resonates so deeply. And I really do believe that like you do have the capability to rewire and like
Yeah.
and not just with this, but like with a lot of
I
kind
think.
of chronic,
And
yeah,
it's for life. Like when you
yes.
purchase the Rocksteady program and become a Rocksteady community member, you own it for life. You
Hmm.
can revisit it over and over again. I used it with my marriage. I used it with birthing my babies. Any intense and new experience, I had the skills and tools to expand, to surrender, to back myself, to meet those icky younger parts that are, rattling up my subconscious into my awareness. All the tools and skills are there and the community's there. So it really is for life. And I'm not sure the
Yes.
learning ever ends. There's no destination.
No, and I think it's different for different phases of your life, like you said. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you so much for your time, Bethany. Um, Again, if you're interested, seekingbalance.com.au. I'm Joey Remenyi. It's been really beautiful to have this conversation today. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now. Yeah.